Viewer Craig says, late be honest, it's gotten out of hand the last 4 years, but because we're a liberal, you decided to bring the cons into the conversation for no reason. Good comment. I think it pairs well with these two asking me if Pierre Poilievre's campaign is paying me to make these videos. To clarify, no, I'm not making these videos on behalf of a political party or anyone else. I'm not even a member of any political party. That said, it's very encouraging to me to get comments from both sides thinking that I'm secretly a mouthpiece for the other party because it means I'm striking the right tone in the videos. I'm trying to get people to understand the history and underlying causes of these issues, not encourage them to vote for anyone in particular. A lot of people have tried to guess my political views based on the content of these videos, and nobody has done a very good job so far. The reason I bring the conservatives and their contribution to these problems into the conversation is because I have a memory longer than 4 years. In fact, I was concerned about things like housing prices and temporary foreign workers all the way back in the early 2010s before the Liberals were even elected. I saw home prices going up, household debt increasing, and companies becoming increasingly reliant on temporary foreign workers while wages stagnated and investment into things like training and equipment lagged behind other countries. Basically, I see all these problems as being the cumulative effect of bad policy and short-term thinking over many years. Yes, the problems are worse now than they were 10 years ago because more time has passed and we haven't done anything about them. But it was still obvious 10 or 15 years ago that they were happening, and we didn't do anything about it back then either, when it would have been a lot easier to get back on track. It's perfectly valid to want a change in government, and based on the polling data, it's almost certain that we're going to get one. What I'm trying to get across is that a change in government alone is not going to fix these things. We have to actually implement solutions and support them over the long term. That also means that we have to hold our politicians accountable for actually doing something about it, instead of always just voting against the person that we want to keep out of office. The way I see it, federal politics in Canada really isn't about principles or policies, it's about patronage. People want to get elected so they can get a high-paying job and hand out some other jobs to their little buddies. This is why we have such a chronic issue with short-term thinking that only goes as far as the next election, and a focus on policies that sound good instead of policies that actually work. Politics isn't about fixing problems, it's just about getting elected, and as the public has gotten more polarized and more partisan in their discussions, it's only gotten worse. This comment is a good example. Pierre has refrained from the immigration question, but speculation has always been that he wants to slow it down. If someone is running to be the Prime Minister of the country, you shouldn't have to speculate about what they would do, they should just tell you instead of dodging questions. Keep in mind that Poilievre is the same guy who used to always say, "Just the number please," or "Yes or no please" during question period, and now he's avoiding questions and giving non-answers and canned responses in exactly the same way that he used to complain about. This comment was in response to a video where I pointed out that Poilievre consistently refused to answer any questions about his approach to immigration targets or a potential cap on student visas until 2 seconds after the Liberals announced that they were putting in a cap, at which point he says that obviously he would have done it and done it much earlier than the Liberals did to prevent the issue in the first place. The problem with that, as I pointed out in the video, is that it's completely inconsistent with what the Conservatives did while they were in power and with what they've said over the past year or two. The thing is, making you speculate about what he would do instead of just telling you is completely intentional and is an increasingly popular political tactic, especially when running against an unpopular leader like Trudeau. By stating the problem, blaming the problem on the current leader, and saying he'll fix the problem, but not telling you what he'd actually do, he allows you to mentally fill in whatever solution you think is best without having to commit to actually doing it. By refusing to answer the question for as long as possible, he leaves the door open to do whatever he wants after the election without being accused of flip-flopping. He could easily say that we don't need to do anything about our immigration system, that we need to keep bringing in more temporary residents to address the labor shortage, and that his housing plan is projected to produce enough homes for everyone. If the housing plan fails, he can turn around and blame the other parties or provincial and municipal governments for getting in the way. The important thing is that he knows that the people who voted for him won't hold him accountable. I'm going to ask you a hypothetical question, and I want you to think about it and be totally honest with yourself about the answer. You don't have to tell me, but it's a good way to think about your own approach to politics. I'm going to use Poilievre as an example here, but if you're a Liberal supporter, do the same exercise with the parties reversed. Imagine that it's 2025 and you got the election result you wanted. Poilievre is Prime Minister and can now implement all of his plans to fix the problems he's been talking about. Now, imagine it's another 4 years later, 2029, and things haven't gotten any better. In fact, they've gotten a little worse. Housing is still unaffordable, the economy is stagnant, we're still not seeing investment into workers, and so on. Someone who dislikes Poilievre points this out to you in an online comment and suggests maybe Poilievre wasn't all he's cracked up to be. Do you A. Say, "You know what, you're right," and demand answers from the Conservative Party and ask why you should vote for them again, or B. Start to defend Poilievre and say something along the lines of, "It would be way worse if Trudeau was still in charge," or "The provinces and cities didn't cooperate with his plans so he couldn't get anything done," or "It takes more than 4 years to undo the damage done by Trudeau." If the answer was B, I want you to ask yourself, why? Why are you going to bat for the political class when they would never do the same for you? So coming back to your first comment, no, I'm not supporting the Liberal Party, and I'm not criticizing the Conservatives because I want Trudeau to be re-elected. Personally, I think he should have resigned back in 2019 after the SNC-Lavalin thing. But I also find Poilievre to be deeply unimpressive, and I'm disappointed that this is the caliber of people we have competing to run the country. We're the ones who vote for them, and we're the ones who pay their salaries, but somehow they've convinced us to argue with each other over which one would be worse, instead of asking them to explain why we should vote for either of them when they're both so shit. Like I said, I don't think politicians here really have strong principles, they just want to get elected, and in that way, politics is more a reflection of our culture than it is a driving force in our society. So, personally, I don't really care that much who gets elected. I see it as more important to get people to understand issues better, to start thinking more long-term, and to hold their own elected politicians accountable, instead of just constantly defending their own team and attacking the other one. That's a big part of why I make these videos, and why I try to keep it as factual and non-partisan as possible. I don't want to tell you who to vote for, I just want you to understand the problem. We can't make our politicians better unless we get better first.